Okay, Eric, so good to connect with you. Appreciate you making the time. I look forward to learning more about you and what you've built at Thread for Thoughts.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Where I'd love to start is just, I saw that you went to school in Allentown, Pennsylvania, but is that where you grew up? I'd love to learn a little bit more about your origin story.
No, I grew up close, actually, about an hour away in the suburbs of New Jersey, about 30 minutes outside of New York City.
What part?
Livingston, Livingston, New
Okay.
Jersey.
I grew up in Bergen County in a small town called Waldwick. You've probably never heard of it. I don't think.
Actually, yeah, I've heard of it. My whole
Okay.
family is from New Jersey. So we are like
Oh,
Jerseyites. I live in LA now, but the whole family is Jerseyites. You have family in Bergen County,
okay.
Shore, everywhere. So yes.
Oh, that's cool. Okay.
Yeah.
And so did you go from there to school in Pennsylvania and then move out west, or what was sort of the
No,
genesis?
yeah. So I went from there, grew up, went to school in Allentown, decided to start Threads for Thought, along with my now wife. We were dating at the time, in college. And from there, we actually spent our first summer out of school out here in LA on the West Coast, sort of looking for different factories and manufacturers and whatnot to make graphic t-shirts. And that's really kind of how it started. That's how I had been to LA before with my dad and my family, but I never really spent a lot of time here. So I really got like immersed in LA. Didn't move at that time. We spent 12 years living in Hoboken after that.
Oh,
Uh,
wow. Okay.
and stayed on the East Coast and then made the move ultimately here in early 2018.
Okay. That's awesome. And let's take a step back too. I'm curious. You mentioned your parents. I'm wondering, what did they do for a living and how did that influence some of the decisions that you made in your life and
Yeah,
career?
so big influence because my dad was in the apparel industry, and the clothing business. So
Interesting.
yes, so I got introduced to it at an early age. It's not something I ever thought of going into. Like when I was in middle school, high school, it wasn't like, oh, I'm gonna, go into fashion or clothing or anything. But I did get exposed to it, and I did enjoy it. And my dad taught me a ton. And when we were thinking about what we wanted to do after college, a lot of what I got exposed to through him, we wanted to put a different spin on it. And that's kind of where Threads for Thought came into being, because sustainable clothing wasn't super popular in 2006, 7 when I was graduating school. We were pretty
Yeah.
early. But
What did your dad do? Like, so you mentioned, like, was he like making clothing or what was he
yeah,
doing?
he was part of a company that manufactured juniors, women's, all different types of kids apparel. It was more on the mass market side. So they did business with all the major kind of retailers, Walmart to Macy's and everybody in between. So that's what their company did. I was kind of exposed to that and spent time with people he worked with within the industry, through high school and college. And I think ultimately that's kind of what sparked the idea for Threads for Thought, was to try to do something, but in a different way, right? And make it accessible, affordable, not super cheap, but accessible and affordable, and manufactured in a better way.
That's cool. So we'll definitely unpack that. But I'm wondering,
Yeah.
what was if mom or dad, like when you think about most important lesson you've learned from your parents, what comes to mind?
I mean, so many lessons, but I think the ultimate value, was really to always believe in believe in myself. I was always very entrepreneurial, and they always encouraged that. And I think just simply believing in that my thoughts were valid from a very early age, that really helped, I think, kind of just shape and give me the confidence to think the way I thought, honestly, like in high school and college, right? To be in college and know that, I really don't want to go apply for a job. I want to start a business. And I started businesses in high school, little ones, right? Just because I was always interested in it.
Like
And so I
like
think
like
that,
which like what kind of
I
business?
mean, we had a car detailing service. My friends and I did like a scaled snow removal business, like locally around like multiple towns. We had different things that we did just because we were
Yeah.
interested in doing that. I mean, at like 7, I was selling trading cards at the end of my driveway. So Um, so it was all different things, and I was just always interested in that. And I think the just my parents encouraging that type of thought is probably, one of the biggest things that shaped me.
It sounds like they were very nurturing in that sense of if you wanted to do something, like they would help you and not sort of, some parents in some ways maybe discourage that. So it sounds
Yeah, it
really cool.
was less. There wasn't like there was an emphasis on academics, but it wasn't like overly academic, right? It was they really kind of respected for both myself and my brother. They would always seem to respect our thoughts, and I think gave us both a lot of confidence to go out and do some things that we may not have done otherwise.
That's cool. And so you said you met your wife in college. Is her name Lee? Is that how you pronounce it? Lee?
Yes,
Okay.
yes. Believe it or not, we met in SAT class in high school. Went to different colleges. She went to St. Joe's in Philadelphia. I went to Muhlenberg in Allentown, Pennsylvania.
Oh, okay.
And kind of stayed together, saw each other back and forth.
And you study
Yeah.
liberal arts essentially?
Yeah, I studied business within a liberal arts
Okay.
structure. Correct. Yeah.
What did she study?
Education. So she went into teaching. She helped with the business. She continues to help and work in the business in different capacities today. But after school, I really went full time into Threads for Thought, and she went full time into teaching because that's really her passion.
Okay. And so when, like, help me kind of understand when you were in college and you mentioned like this trip out west, like what was sort of the genesis for the business? Like how did that begin?
Um, so we started as a graphic t-shirt company. And the name, right? Threads for Thought. We wanted to put thought behind the threads you wear. That's really where the name kind of came from. We wanted people to think about where their clothing came from, how it was manufactured, and what it was made from, right? So that's kind of where the name came about. And our first collection was really 12 graphic t-shirts. And they all had different sayings, different messages on it about the environment, about conflict. I mean, they were fairly political, honestly, right? We're coming out of college. We were like all amped up on different social issues and causes. And we're like, you're going to wear this on your sleeve, right? Essentially. And we put them on t-shirts, went to find factories, made it out of bamboo, which we thought was sustainable at the time, and started kind of our research into how do you make clothing in a more eco-friendly way. And that was kind of the genesis that led us out west to go find some factories to make it locally at the time, because outsourcing it just felt like such a reach, right? We wanted to really go learn about it. And that's kind of what brought us to LA, because that's where most of the clothing in the US was manufactured. I mean, a lot of the other manufacturing of clothing, Pennsylvania and other places had, already sort of gone away.
Okay. At this point,
California.
Okay. And at this point, is the operation like you and Lee and she's helping,
Yeah.
or do you have like a
Yeah,
team?
it's the two of us. No, it's the two of us, and that's it.
Okay.
We eventually hired one designer, and then we had one independent salesperson.
Okay.
Kind of shortly after, maybe 6 months after we started.
How do you even pay for the t-shirts? Because, as you know, the challenges in retail, right? Like just getting started, inventory, things like that. Like, is at this point, it's like self-funded and bootstrap?
Yeah, it's self-funded, family and friends. And, I had a little bit of money from my other businesses. But yeah, it was essentially bootstrapped. We went and found some factories through connections, asked around friends of friends, family friends, etc. And we were able to get some favorable terms, which helped us out. But essentially, we were wholesaling, so we weren't producing a lot of inventory that was unsold. It wasn't like the time of D2C yet, really. It was like the time like Kitson and Fred Siegel out west, and like Scoop in New York, and like all those types of stores. And that was our initial market. So we essentially designed the line, made some samples, and went out and started selling it to specialty stores. And that's kind of where it started.
How was it initially? Obviously, the messaging is probably different today, but what did you find back then? Like, was it just flying off the shelves in terms of what you produced, or was it hit and miss?
It was interesting. I mean, it did eventually. So we made a couple of like t-shirts. I mean, we made one t-shirt that said "Killing It Softly" on it, and an earth that was kind of like wilting away. We made like a spray painted Africa that was kind of like bleeding. We made one with like a guy with cufflinks playing like chess on the continent of Africa with diamonds and oil. I mean, there were
Wow.
some political statements on these t-shirts that we were doing. And then we had some other ones just about kind of like peace, and some artistic ones about the environment and stuff like that. But that was the first collection, and that's when it kind of, and so stores were intrigued, and the specialty stores adopted it pretty quickly, at least enough to kind of kick us off and get us off the ground. And then from there, we actually were super lucky and got it seeded into a number of celebrities' hands. And that's kind of what then brought Urban Outfitters into the fold. And they were kind of our first major client that picked up all these graphic t-shirts from
What
us.
year is this? Like the
This
urban
is like
connection?
2000. This is pretty 2008, maybe 2007, 2008. That we started distributing t-shirts into Urban. And those turned into some pretty big orders. So they tested us. Those did fly off the shelves. Those did really well. And then it was just kind of reorders from there.
How did you get into urban? Like, was it the hustle, or was it did something?
Yeah,
It
it
was
was
the
just kind of
celebrities.
hustling.
Yeah.
No, it was just kind of hustling. I mean, I remember at the time, like, I don't know if it was even Google at the time, but I remember on search engines, like looking for, who the buyers are and trying to find out who the directors are and asking around
Yeah.
and firing off emails. The salesperson we ended up hiring at the time also had some relationships at Urban Outfitters. And so ultimately my emails, no one answered them. And he's the one that got us a couple of meetings down there in Philadelphia and kind of got it started. So, but we were aided by some really good PR. I mean, we had a
Right.
lot of people wearing it. We had Don Cheadle wearing it. We had Gavin Rossdale, Gwen Stefani, Paris Hilton, like the big names at the time, like were all sort of wearing these different tees. And Urban saw that and they're like, "Hey, we're going to give these guys a shot." And they gave it a shot,
Wow.
and it kind of went from there.
Why do you think they were wearing it? I'm wondering if it was more the sustainability, or was it like kind of the messaging at that time?
I mean, they were wearing some of the heavy messaging. So if you go back to, I don't know what year it was, but Don Cheadle, he wore that sort of spray painted Africa tee on his Inside the Actors Studio interview for like an hour or 2 hours that he sat for that. And that was really cool. And that was, I mean, totally organic. I'm not even sure where he got it. So I think it was both. I think, it may have been the sustainability, but I think at the outset, it had to be the messaging, because if they're wearing a t-shirt with a clear message,
Yeah.
on it.
That's interesting. So at
Yeah.
that point, I'm curious, like, was your dad telling you like, Eric, like chill out with the, like this is like, at a time where people aren't doing that, like, were you getting any pushback from friends or family, or like, how did you come up with
No,
the,
I wasn't. No pushback really. It
okay.
was no, not really. I think they were just kind of like, well, we'll see where this goes. I mean, friends and family afterwards were like, there's no way this is going to work. They couldn't believe it actually worked. They were kind of like, let's let them do it for a year and let them fail. And I don't know. That's kind of after the fact. They were all just,
Yeah, that's cool.
I didn't realize it at the time though. Nobody told me. So
Okay. So back then, because I feel like I had seen the brand in Nordstrom, was the biggest sort of retailer Urban, or was it Nordstrom or something else? Like
So
who's sort of
Nordstrom
the,
was the first, and then it kind of went from there.
oh,
Urban was the first, then we went to Nordstrom and Bloomingdale's, Saks, some of those bigger guys that picked up the brand, and then we started expanding beyond graphic T-shirts as well. So we just expanded into basic tees and hoodies and stuff that wasn't so controversial. Because honestly, that first collection, Urban Outfitters, I think was the only major retailer that picked it
okay.
up. Right, Nordstrom wasn't going to have that on their shelves. I don't think. I mean, one of Urban's best tees, it's set across the front, "Bombing for peace is like fucking for virginity."
Wow.
And I still remember the number. I think they sold like 15,000 of those t-shirts.
Wow.
So that was something that other retailers were not going to buy.
Yeah, that's interesting. Well, like, yeah, Nordstrom being like more conservative. What do you think was like the hardest part of scaling from, those initial tees to like the Nordstroms and the Urbans from a business perspective? Like, what was sort of the biggest sort of challenge that you were facing at that point?
Um, It was, I mean, we definitely needed capital and infrastructure. So after kind of that first, from just a straight business perspective, right? We were just a rickety kind of like operation, a couple of people. Um, and we needed more capital and infrastructure to do business with the majors. So I took in some investment, partnered up with a strategic operating company, still ran the company um, myself and everything, but we were able to like get investments to get that support that allowed us to scale. And that
Okay.
was from like, all in the operations back end and the nitty gritty of doing business with these bigger guys to funding production that we needed to in advance in bigger numbers. So that's those partnerships, which we took on really sometime in 2008 and nine is the right, really 2008 before the world fell apart financially at the end of the year. We
Oh,
did that. And then we had like the whole financial crisis thing, which was really soon after we started. And that was a whole, cluster, if you will, that we had to navigate really early on in the brand's history.
I just finished reading Andy Dunn's memoir, with his experience at Bonobos. I feel like a lot of the book was like, it's part meant. I don't know if you've seen it. Have you read it by chance?
I haven't read it.
Okay,
I
so
know
part of it
that.
is like his mental health journey, right? Just
Uh-huh.
everything he's gone through, and then the other part is like it seems like he's having to raise money every other chapter, right? He's just going through. It's just they're just burning money, right? And they're just
Yes.
trying to keep the company afloat, and then they eventually sell it. Um, is that what it's like, or is that do you feel like you guys were fortunate and then you had like the right
Not for
partners?
me.
Okay,
I mean, not for me. That model is so different than the way we kind of started and grew our business. Um, we started in wholesale. We had always remained primarily wholesale. We have a D2C business that's really healthy and good now, but that was really funded from wholesale growth. It was funded more organically, right?
interesting.
We didn't go raise venture capital money or VC money to go out and just kind of buy a business, if you will, right? We we bootstrapped it. I mean, even with the investment, we weren't taking in like, we weren't raising seed rounds and series A and B and C and like constantly raising capital from investors. It was kind of strategic partnership and we're done. We go. So we didn't go through like any real tranches of raises or anything. We did explore it over the years. Actually got a number of offers like around 2012 and 2013 and didn't take any of them and just decided we don't really want to be we didn't want to go the venture capital private equity route at that time.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. And so when you think about like sort of the ethical and social sustainability, is that something that from inception that you were thinking about, or is that like
From
through
day
the
one.
years?
No, from day one. I mean, that was really a
Ah,
big
okay.
part of why we started Threads for Thought was to create something that was kind of countercultural to what was going on in 2006 and 7. To be a little bit more healthy. And I think, the excesses of the time and just like the celebrity culture that I remember of the time, right? Being in like fashion and whatnot, we really wanted to kind of do it differently and still make it cool and affordable and accessible to people. So yeah, we had the sustainability component from day one and the social component. From like, I don't know, second week, right? We were looking around for different nonprofits to partner with. So we identified the International Rescue Committee and the NRDC, the Natural Resources Defense Council, to work with. Um, and I think part of the whatever you want to call it, political, social nature of that first collection, we really wanted to tie it back to the causes and the work on the ground that we were designing, that our designs were inspired by.
What do you think are the most important things that people should know when it comes to? Because I feel like some people will purchase because of those reasons. Some people don't even look, and they might
Yeah.
just like the style. But like if you were talking to some folks about the sustainability part of it and being socially conscious, like what are the sort of key takeaways you would impart on them around that?
Um, I think there's kind of, as you just said, there's a couple of camps, right? I think we believed when we started it that would be the catalyst for people and customers to come and buy the brand. We learned kind of quickly that wasn't going to happen, right? And that you need to have great product. Everything else has to be great about it, and it's a nice little added bonus potentially. And at the time, funny enough, some retailers looked at it as a negative. I mean, they were like, "Oh, sustainability, we tried that. It's scratchy,
Oh,
it's
wow.
terrible. People don't like that. We don't want to have any like organic any clothing on our shelves, right?" So it was actually a negative for the first like 3 or 4 years, I would say, in going and selling these bigger retailers. Um, but I think the biggest thing that we focus on first was the materials and how it's made. So cotton is one of the most toxic crops, which has an effect on humans, right? Those that grow it, work the fields, process it, etc. So buying organic cotton that is not as toxic to the fields and therefore the water runoff, the land, the workers, the people, it is a big deal, organic versus conventional. It has health effects on humans, not just you as the end user wearing it. Right? So I think the materials that it's made from, how can those not harm the world quite as much? I think is really the one takeaway. And then it's a really water intensive business, washing, dyeing, all that kind of all the stuff that we do to make clothes soft, and to make them in all the beautiful colors that we make them in, and denim especially is water intensive. So we really focus on water use in the supply chain and trying to reduce the amount of water that goes into it and recycle that water. Those are the two major aspects to me that have always stood out, and I think are the most important.
Is everything made in LA, or like the material
No, we're
is
totally outsourced now, so we make nothing
okay?
in LA anymore.
Okay.
We haven't for a really long time. Um, so we're all around the world now. We work in China, Pakistan, India, Guatemala. Um, those are our current countries that we source from.
Was there another brand or person that like you drew inspiration from, like as you were building the brand?
Um, it was hard to not look at what Tom's was doing at the time, right? In their one for one model, because Blake and I kind of he started Tom's right around
Around
this period. Um, and he didn't come at it from a sustainability standpoint. Obviously, he came at it from this like one for one giving model. So we learned a lot about that model because we were obviously seeing the success that had, and really started to learn more and more about how that had a positive or negative impact, right? And
Was
what
it tempting too to like, oh, we do this, like
it
it's
was
gonna
really tempting. I mean, you can't imagine how many conversations we had about how do we go one for one? How do we go one for one? How do we get? And it's like we've got all these products. We got sweatshirts, t-shirts, dresses, leggings, all this stuff, right? It's like it's not so simple. We can't just do like a one for one messaging where it's like you buy this shoe, we give this shoe, right? It's very, very simple. So, and it also just didn't feel organic, right? But there was a lot of conversation, sales teams, marketing people, like, hey, look at what Tom's is doing. Look at what Tom's is doing, right? So,
it sounds like every pitch on Shark Tank now, right? Is like
yes, it
similar for
sounds like
those
every pitch
startups.
on
Yeah.
Shark Tank. So there was a lot of conversations around that through the years.
Interesting. And so the most important thing you learned from Tom's.
I think this whole social commerce piece of it, right? Just that I think Tom's helped to validate that.
Okay.
And it certainly helped to validate that consumers, customers, the market was was into potentially more socially conscious brands and commerce. So to me, that's the most positive thing that kind of came out of Tom's is they were the first to really scale that idea or model. Because like I said, we kind of hit resistance early on from a lot of these bigger retailers on either like social commerce, we don't really want to get political, and anything
Yeah.
that was about the environment or, you know, giving back or whatever, it could be interpreted in a lot of ways. Retailers were just a little bit more scared then. It wasn't the more activist environment that we are in now. So I think, that helped to lay the groundwork to get companies more vocal, more involved, and kind of standing behind principles, as opposed to just shying away from them.
That makes sense. And how would you describe obviously the internet was out when the brand was born, but like what role has the internet played in the growth of the company, would you say?
I mean, massive, right? A lot of our business transitioned to online. I mean, even the brick and mortar business that we had is transitioned online, whether it be through our site, Nordstrom site. Stitch Fix is a massive partner today, and they're 100% digital. Um, so yeah, I mean, it went from this specialty brick and mortar business at the very beginning to we're probably 80% digital at this point, through all of our different retail channels.
I wouldn't have guessed that number. That's interesting.
Yeah, it's a pretty yeah, it's big. I mean, even at the more major department stores now, and if you kind of look at how much of their sales come from their digital channels,
Yeah.
really been a growing chunk, right? The pandemic accelerated that quite a bit. I mean, we had it's getting back, it's starting to swing back towards brick and mortar a little bit now, right? But I would say in 2019, it was more of like 50% of our business was digital. And then it went to 100%, right? During
Oh
2020
yeah.
and even into 2021. And now it's kind of swinging back, where obviously demand in brick and mortar stores is coming back. But a lot of that distribution is essentially getting rebuilt, right? In a way, and kind of scaling back into it.
Right. Yeah. I imagine the pandemic in a way, I know for like, companies that make running shoes, it was amazing, but comfortable clothes is
It was
something that
good.
people needed, right?
Yeah, it was definitely. I mean, at first, it was the first 2 to 3 months for everybody was like, is the world going to end? But after that initial kind of pause, right? Um, yeah, I mean, we were in the right category for sure.
How did you feel like you led through that period of, February, March, April? Like, what did you feel like by this point? Obviously, you have like a team of people. Or how many employees at that point?
We've got about 70.
Okay. When you think about like one or two of the most important leadership lessons through navigating the uncertainty, what would you impart on someone else running a business?
Um, Honesty and transparency. So that's really always been a major key and core value of the brand and the culture that we try to instill is just honesty and transparency, right? We're going to be honest about what the business is doing. We don't try to hide or shield or have like closed door meetings, right? I mean, of course we do sometimes, but we pride ourselves on being transparent and honest just about whatever the current situation is. Could be really good business, could be really bad business. Here's the state of the company. And I think in trying times, it's even more important, right? In good times, it's really important that you share that and then everybody participate in that. And then and I think it makes it that much easier that when things inevitably you hit rough patches, you can have that same honest discussion and it's received I think in a more authentic way, right?
It sounds like it probably creates a level of psychological safety. Like
Yeah.
what Eric says is what he means. It's not is what he says like is that what he means, right? Like they understand, I imagine.
We try to be just really direct, honest, and transparent, just about the entire business with anyone that's interested. Right? It's not that there's some that are a lot more interested in what's going on, and we're always happy to share that. And I think just that as a core value is really important, and it's helped our team and our culture over the years.
What's one piece of advice that comes to mind if you were going to give some guidance around hiring a team or talent? Like what are those sort of one or two nuggets that come into mind based on your experience?
Um, if I look for people that are interested in a lot of different things that don't want to necessarily just stay in their lane. So whenever we've hired, not a blanket statement by any means, but when we've typically, I think those that came from more very structured corporate environments had a more difficult time getting outside of their lane, basically. And I really encourage everyone to get outside their lane. And that's not to step on other people's toes or anything like that, but it's really to just share ideas and be collaborative. Because there's a lot of good ideas that come from design about our D2C business, right? And then our D2C business comes from giving feedback to design. And I think everyone having just an open mind within the team and being open to receiving feedback, thoughts, and being encouraged to share those, in an entrepreneurial way is really important. And it kind of helps everybody open up and think about things a little bit differently.
How do you test for that in advance?
Difficult, really difficult. We put people through some scenarios, we're like, hey, if what would you do if somebody came to you from, X division, right? And would you kind of give them your authentic thoughts, or would you not? Right. Well, we kind of role play it through the interview process, or we try to, but honestly, it's really hard. I mean, until somebody gets into the role and gets into the team,
Yeah.
it's a really difficult thing to assess. But I don't know, you can tell, and I think over the years, I've learned to kind of tell who is faking it and who is not.
Yeah.
Right. In the interview process, a lot of it is kind of gut at the end of the day. You ask the right questions, but you can tell, I feel like, if people are faking it.
Yeah, that makes sense. I'm always fascinated, especially when you got a team of 70, the good and the bad of being at a smaller company, right? Like if you're at a big company, there's probably less visibility on you. When you're at a smaller company, everything you do matters, right? And to your point, you're going to engage with people. So how is that person going to engage? Are they actively listening to the feedback, or are they pretending to do so?
Yeah, it's really important at a smaller company, and it's not for everybody, right? So again, I kind of come back to, even in the interview process, being really honest and transparent of what the expectations are going to be when you come in. So my hope is that even if they are trying to fake it, they might get the hint that this isn't for you. Yeah. If you are not willing to do X, Y, and Z and be open to this type of, environment.
Yeah, that's cool. I'm curious, when you think about the business has been around since 06, right? If I'm thinking about it correctly.
Yes.
What has been the most challenging business decision you've had to make so far?
I think when we pivoted to Los Angeles, kind of as a home base.
Tell me about that.
That came at a pretty turbulent time for the brand in general. We were going through a lot of just distribution challenges with some of our major customers. We kind of followed the wholesale path a little too far, meaning making, really listening to our clients' feedback instead of maybe doing what was right for the brand and the ultimate bigger picture direction.
What was an example of that? I'd love to hear.
When you work with these bigger retailers, they all come to you and kind of put you in a box, right? Eventually. And they say, we're covered with Marine Layer over here and alternative apparel, and Bonobos is doing this for us. We need you guys to do this for us, right? And so everybody has kind of a different outlook based on, what their business needs are. And so that's the challenge of wholesale. And I think building a brand within wholesale is you can't just go do what you want or do what you feel is right for the brand, because it has economic consequences potentially. So it is this kind of give and take. And in that, you can definitely lose your product kind of identity, your core identity. You can get outside of your lane fairly easily, I would say, in trying to do things that you may have otherwise wouldn't have done. So there were instances where we did that with different partners, just to continue growth. And so we kind of hit an inflection point where that all kind of came home to roost a little bit, especially as we were trying to build our D2C business. And we had to make some difficult decisions. And ultimately, we decided to pivot the team. We were kind of split between Los Angeles and New York, which wasn't really helping. And so we had to kind of pick a home, and chose to do it in LA. And so I think that was one of the hardest decisions, both personally, because we lived on the East Coast, right? And we're like, we're really going to do this. All our family and friends are there. And then from a business perspective, those that were working for us in New York, what are you gonna how do we transition that, right? What exceptions do we make? And all the decisions that kind of go with taking a home base and pivoting it. So, and then how do we pivot the brand kind of at the same time? And I looked at it as kind of a critical and crucial decision. It's funny, all the remote work that goes on now, right? And all the arguments about in office and not in office, and right, that wasn't a thing yet.
Interesting.
And I still believe, at least in our business, that there has to be this amount of time where you're in person, right? Especially with design, creative, marketing. It is very hard to do that effectively in a remote setting.
What is Lee saying at this point? Like it
I
sounds like
mean,
she's still a kind of a sounding board for you, right?
yeah, Lee was not, Lee was okay with LA, right? But she wasn't, oh, yes, let's move to California. It was definitely a collective decision that we made together, and a difficult one. Ultimately, it worked out. We're really happy with it. We're happy here. It was a great decision for the business. But it was a really difficult one at the time. And then simultaneously, how do we put kind of the brand back on track,
Yeah.
towards growth? So it was part of that whole master kind of plan that we were trying to execute.
And the catalyst for the move to LA was at the time manufacturing, or no? What was the catalyst for LA?
It wasn't really at the time. Our design and creative was based in Los Angeles,
Okay.
and a lot of our sales, marketing, some of our operations were based in New York. And then we also had some distribution centers, both in Los Angeles and operations in Kansas City, Missouri, believe it or not.
Okay.
And so we were spread out. I mean, we were just spread. And it kind of happened, I would say, organically for all different reasons over the years. But ultimately, pulling that back together in one area, we felt would kind of bring this cohesion and brand vision, we hoped, and culture kind of back together, with everybody being all the teams together, from sales to marketing to design and product creation. Everyone kind of being together would hopefully create kind of a new energy for the brand. And it ended up happening, which is
Yeah.
good.
That sounds amazing. Not to draw back to Bonobos, but it's part of the inflection point as well. They had this like Santa Monica office with all these like engineers and like sort of the e-commerce type of thing, kind of like what Macy's did. Macy's.com team was in San Francisco and then headquartered in New York.
Yeah.
And they got to the point where they had to make a decision of like, we just need to shut that office down because it's a completely different culture and nothing is gelling. And so it's interesting to see those parallels.
Yeah, exactly. And I think ultimately, I think that's the challenge too with the whole remote situation, right? Especially in the type of industry that we're in. If you're going to create a culture and just be humans and have human interaction, I think it's important to have regular contact. And creatively, the energy is just different when you're physically in a room together, versus on a screen.
I totally agree. I'm curious, you seem really ambitious career wise, and you've got two young kids now. What do you do to show up as your best self at work and showing up as the best dad at home? How do you balance that?
It's difficult. I mean, especially during the week, it's difficult. Weekends, we really try to shut it off, and take those 2 days to just be a family, right? I rarely work on the weekends. I know a lot of people do, but I rarely do it. And so that's kind of really our family time that we carve out. During the week, though, I mean, once I'm home and until the kids go to bed, really, again, do my best to just shut it down. And then when I need to do stuff, after they go to bed, I go back downstairs, and I'll continue to work, if I need to. But I think putting up just some roadblocks, right? Some personal boundaries, I guess. Because it's a difficult one. I mean, you get sucked back into all different things that are going on. People are sending you texts, emails, you're always connected, right? So putting the phone down, putting it away, putting it in a different room, when I get home, and leaving it there, being disciplined enough to leave it there
Yeah.
until the kids are down and go to bed, and then going back to it and checking it. Um, I won't say that I don't make exceptions. I absolutely do, but really try to be conscious about putting up those boundaries and making sure we're present in the family time.
It sounds like if you've put in the level of thought to create a team around you that is of high caliber, that you trust, and all those other things, then you can afford to do that, right? But if it's
Sure.
the opposite, then it's like you're always thinking about fire drill.
For sure. Yes. And fire drills always happen, but they happen a lot less now. I think, yeah, setting up your business structure, setting up your leaders and empowering them is one of the most important things anybody that's growing a business can do, especially once it gets to any kind of scale, right? And you have people on your team that you're trusting to do that. You got to let them go do it. I mean, otherwise it's, you're just kind of stunting everything.
That makes sense. A couple last questions for you. One on books. Is there one that comes to mind that's really influenced you that you recommend other people read?
I grew up, I played basketball. And so I mean, Shoe Dog was pretty interesting to me as a book. I was a huge Jordan fan, played basketball my whole life, and was just kind of idolized kind of that whole Nike Jordan culture. And so that was an interesting book to me. Um, Not a huge fan of him these days, but I did read the Elon Musk biography, and his story is pretty interesting. And I think there's a lot of nuggets that people can pull from, especially entrepreneurs, right? I think there's a lot of good nuggets in that. I don't Now that I'm a father, I think the last 5 years, the only time I have a chance to sit down and read a book is on vacation, which I've only taken one of with my wife. So now I've pivoted to the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, the Atlantic. I'm like just a serial reader of all kinds of news.
Yeah.
The New Yorker magazine. I mean, that's like kind of where I go these days. Because it's just so hard to like find the time. I get like, a quarter of the way through and it's like, well, wait, what happened in that book I was
Yeah.
reading?
That's what happened to
I
me
don't
in
know if you feel
Shoe
the same
Dog.
way.
Well, so the bonus of doing this is if someone wrote a book, um, it forces me, it provides a deadline that I have to read their book. I was flying back from Philadelphia and I had Carla Harris's book and I just banged it out on the plane. Right. And you're when you're going to interview somebody that's written a book, you also have to like deconstruct it a little bit, right, to
That's
formulate
true.
questions. So it's not like I could just flip through it. So I have like a little bit of a process. If I read them, if it's a memoir like Andy's, I download the Audible and then I go back to the book to deconstruct. And so I do like I'm on and off with Audible, but like if it's a memoir that someone's reading themselves, then I like to listen to it. So it just kind of depends. And then probably similarly with young kids, it's like if I'm walking the dog, and sometimes I just want to listen to ESPN. So it's like there are
It's all
those
over
times
the
where I just
place.
can't listen to podcasts all day.
Totally.
So I try to squeeze it in where I can. But no, I totally get it. I am curious if you were to impart some advice on like let's say someone early on in their career, they want to make a big impact in this world. What are a couple pieces of general life or career advice that you would give them?
I think, I mean, my biggest thing that I try to stay true to is you got to enjoy. You really do. I mean, everybody says it, I feel like, but you do have to enjoy what you do. And there's parts that you probably won't enjoy it. There's parts of building threads I did not enjoy at all, right? Frustrating parts. Um, Many over the years, but I think in the aggregate, you have to be able to separate out total enjoyment. Like, this is what I believe in. I really do like what I'm doing. This is just a rough patch, right? And have the resiliency to get through those rough patches that are absolutely inevitable, no matter what you choose to do, especially if you're choosing to build something and be an entrepreneur. You're going to have a lot of rough patches and they could be extended. I mean, I had like extended rough patches. It's not like a 2 week rough patch, right? I've had 6 month rough patches where it just feels like a slog. And I think you don't want to confuse those, now I have a little bit more perspective on it, but early in my career, I really didn't. I mean, I didn't have any perspective. I was just kind of learning as I went. And there were times where I'm like, I hate this. I hate what I'm doing. I'm making no impact, right? And it's just kind of in your head. But ultimately, for whatever reason, the resilience stayed and I just kind of powered through it. And you get to the other side and you kind of remember why you're doing what you're doing, right? And you enjoy it again. So you don't have to always enjoy it, but I think having sort of an enjoyment and perspective and a purpose to what you do, and then just being resilient enough to get through those times when it's tested.
That's great advice. I love that. And I can totally see that. And just in reflecting myself, like sometimes the bad times are longer than you think. But you're also more capable than you think you are, right? And it's that balance of, I think you said it, like if you know, sort of like the purpose, and it's something that you overall big picture enjoy, just know it's not going to be, all sunshine and rainbows the whole entire time. It's hard when you're young to even understand, what that means. I think of like the first great boss I've ever had. I thought that would kind of last like for a long time. And then when that goes away, you're like, oh, okay, there's a shelf life to this, but it doesn't mean I can't enjoy what I do, or I can't enjoy who I work for per
Yep.
se.
No, absolutely.
Cool, Eric. I feel like you've given me a ton. I really appreciate just kind of the level of thought you put into the responses. I always say it's my job not to screw it up from here.
Not at all. Not at all. Thank
Is
you.
it?
Thanks
Oh
for the
yeah.
time. It's great conversation.
Oh, you're welcome. Do you feel like we missed anything or anything else to kind of weave in?
Um, no, I thought it was a good conversation. I love
Likewise,
having
likewise.
conversations about business and building things.
This is my long form conversations about like real life experiences. Like this is absolutely my favorite thing to do. So I appreciate just like I knew of the brand a long time ago, but to also kind of learn through the stuff that you've gone through. I've spent a little time with Bayard over at like American Giant to see like some of the brands that like now I look at and I'm like, oh, they're doing some things the right way. Like that's so different from, maybe 15 years ago when you just sort of buy something and again, just not know, right? Like just not have the awareness of like how it's made.
Yeah.
So if you can marry the style that we talked about earlier, right? The style with like hey, I'd rather buy like 5 things. It might be a little more expensive, but they're like good for the world and they're going to actually last all year round than buying $35 shirts from Target for my kids. Like, it's to me, it's like, it's really cool to learn the lessons, but also help share the message.
Yeah. No, thank you for doing that. I mean, I don't look at it as like a purist thing either. I never kind of have. I think that's one distinction I think between us and some of even the brands that came before 2006, that the retailers are like, no, get out of here. We don't want anything sustainable, right? We're not as purist about it. We try to do everything we can in every aspect of the supply chain, but we understand we're also not perfect, right? We're still making clothing. So it's really about just bettering the world, and it's about progress. It's not about perfection. And I think if that's your goal and that's your standard, like it's just not achievable. You can strive for it, right? But if you hit perfection, I don't know. I challenge you on it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
No, that
challenge you
makes
that it's
sense.
actually perfect, right?
Totally. No, 100%. That's a great way to think about it.